This is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Hope you enjoy this Critical Thought, your daily discussion on game design. And be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and you can pitch future Critical Thought topics. Hey everybody, for today's Critical Thought, this was suggested by a fan of the channel, Josh Mole, who let me know a few days ago regarding a big change heading to E3 this year. And for E3 2017, this is going to be the first time that the actual show will be open to the public. Previous years they had like a side conference or like a side section for non-members of the industry, but this will be the first year that they will be actually selling tickets. And I figure that with that news, this will be a great time to talk a little bit about E3 versus GDC and give a little bit of history while we talk about whether or not this change is good or bad. So, E3 of course stands for the Electronic Entertainment Expo and was founded in 1995. Man, I'm feeling old again. And what happened was originally when it came to the video game industry during the late 80s into the early 90s, that when it came for news and talk about new technology, the video game market was basically folded into the Consumer Electronics Show, or CES. But as video games grew in terms of popularity and design, it basically was too big to share CES with, and E3 was created. And E3 is considered the business or focus of games when it comes to these big conferences. We're not going here to listen to developers talk. This is more about the business side of the video game industry. This is where the new technology is revealed, big games are announced, and things along those lines. And as it originally started, this was mainly for members of the press and of course other game developers or other companies to see what their competitors are doing. And as things have certainly grown over the years, so has the spectacle of E3. Now, whether the companies like Sony or Ubisoft who are at the show, or when Nintendo has their own conference basically taking place during the time, essentially E3 is one of the big shows of the year. And if you're a major studio, chances are you're going to make an appearance usually with a game demo specifically tailored for E3. And developing that demo, that could easily be its own critical thought. And speaking of which, while we're talking the historical side of the game industry, one of these days we do need to have a discussion about the game industry crash of the late 80s. Because it is a very interesting topic, and it kind of goes with these critical thoughts with talking more about the game industry and design. But getting back to the E3 or what we're at today, E3 is considered the trade show. Again, you're going here to see what the other members of the industry are currently doing. And as we just said, when it comes to the major presentations, things have certainly gotten a lot bigger and grander. Ubisoft's conference this year seems to be some kind of almost like drug-fueled hallucination of games, comedy, and whatever the heck they have up their sleeves. And for these shows, again, we're going to be watching for the major announcements. When it comes to GDC, this is more about the art side of the industry. This is more about the craftsmanship. When we're at GDC, and I went in, 2011 at this point, this is where, while there may be, there may be presentations about the latest games, this is more about things from the designer and the art side of things. For people interested in being in the game industry, especially about designing and what goes into making games, I think GDC is more important than E3. If you're looking for the latest news, or you're already in the industry and you want to see what your fellow developers are working on, E3 is usually the better show. But when it comes to GDC, it has been open to the public, but it's not as, I think, interesting to the consumer as E3 is. Again, when you go to GDC, you're going to be mainly talking to developers about what's going on in terms of design. If you're students, this is definitely very informative about seeing the design process and talking to people who have been in the trenches when it comes to game development. But getting back to the topic at hand, what does it mean that E3 is going to be open to the public? And honestly, I think this is one of those things that may be a little too little too late in terms of raising awareness. As we said, E3 was founded in 1995, and back then, this was again during the era before the internet took over and before game coverage was really that prevalent. And when it came to E3, this was our chance to see the latest stuff. And I remember like G4 and before that Tech TV, they made like their yearly tradition to show E3. Because back then you really couldn't get access to it, and this was long before the time of Twitch, YouTube, and streaming. Now, because E3 was still at that time and until this year coming up was closed to the public, this opened up the door for public conventions, your Penny Arcade Expo, or I'm sorry, PAX, and smaller. I'm sorry, my mind is failing me. Smaller presentations all around the country and, of course, throughout the world. And this was the case, or this was a chance for the public to basically get together and celebrate games. And with the likes of PAX basically bringing a sense of professionalism or some place that developers could actually show up, this opened up the doors for either local or national developers to show up and show their games to the consumer. And these shows basically gave the opportunity for developers and the community to really mingle and talk. Something that E3 probably should have done many years ago. But I think it's always important to have like a trade show or have like this professional show along with these more public or the less, professional. I do quotes there because the industry, especially when we look at some of the crazier shows, may not be as professional as when we look at something like an Apple conference or a car trade show. But when it comes to the video game industry, in terms of like this kind of trade atmosphere, I think E3 definitely still serves a purpose on that front. But it has become kind of muddled in terms of where you should be focusing your attention. As we said, when it comes to E3 versus GDC, and again, we're not even going to be talking about shows like PAX and smaller ones, it comes down to E3 being like the trade or professional side, GDC being the developer and, craftsman side. And for those of you watching this who have either attended E3, GDC, or both, what do you make of these shows? Now, with GDC, I definitely think it still has major relevance. The annual GDC presentations and developer talks, wow, my mouth just failed me there, developer talks, are very informative. And I mentioned this before, but George Tan's conference from Plants vs. Zombies still was one of the hallmarks, or the high watermarks, when I went to GDC 2011. And GDC is also when we had the Game Developer Choice Awards, where the industry basically rewards its peers for each year. And I always find those kinds of very professional shows very informative and interesting. And that could also be a critical thought in terms of that, the presentation side of things. But when it comes to E3, especially with trailers being leaked, and again, all the conferences happening, there have been talks about whether or not E3 is still relevant. And like I said, let me know in the comments below what you think about that. I think, in my opinion, GDC will probably never lose its importance, but as developers, especially Nintendo, who no longer actually has a booth there, but has their own conference during that time, I think it's only a matter of time before Microsoft and Sony will follow suit. Now, they, of course, have their own major conferences throughout the year, but I think it's becoming less and less important for E3, considering that it has become or in the past, it has been a major strain on the developer's part. What we were talking about a few minutes ago regarding demos, when you're working on a professional demo for E3, that is, of course, less time spent actually working on the game. And in today's world, thanks to the internet, streaming, and etc., you don't really need a physical presence anymore, when you can just put up your announcement on your site or show game footage whenever you want. Now, last year's E3, I remember there was, of course, the big XCOM EU announcement, or I'm sorry, XCOM 2 announcement, and they showed a very, I guess, linear demo or pre-established or pre-developed footage. And that is actually another really big topic regarding these shows and demoing games when it's either in-game footage or pre-rendered or already, recorded footage that is never going to be in the game. And we can certainly talk about examples of that in past years, such as Killzone, that Order game that was released last year, 1882 or something like that. And of course, even stuff like the older Halo demos could be examples of this. And for those of you watching this who are actually in the industry, who have worked, during or for that E3 push, what did you think about it? Did you think that E3 really had an impact on your game? Or was it just you, I guess, putting on a show for the crowd and then, that really didn't help matters? Now, again, as the years have gone by and the game industry has gone more digital and more internet, that has been less and less important. But, back in the early 90s or mid 90s, when there wasn't really that established internet culture, having that chance to show your game to everyone was a very big deal because chances are you weren't going to get another opportunity like that unless, of course, you got a feature in a magazine. And of course, magazines have certainly died out since then, and maybe that's another critical thought as well. But to wrap things up and to summarize, when it comes to E3 versus GDC, E3 is the trade show. It's about the business of games, making sure that your game is being shown and people are getting excited about it. GDC is more of the craftsman, I guess. This is the chance for fellow members of the industry to get together and talk about topics that interest them and have a chance at educating people outside the industry about what does it take to make games. And for those of you watching this who are either consumers or students, if you want to know more about the art of making games, definitely check out GDC. And if you're more interested in the news about the game industry, then that would probably be E3. But again, with the growing rise of expos and other conferences, that kind of news has certainly been spread out across the year. It's no longer just that one time for E3. And I guess to end things on, one more question for you folks. For those of you who have attended both of them, I guess, do you have a preference for which one you like to go to? I guess for me, if I had the opportunity for each year to go to one, I would definitely pick GDC myself because, again, I love talking about game design. And if this year turns out well in terms of the conferences and presentations and such, I will certainly try to make it to GDC 2018. But again, we are very early to be talking about that. So, with that said, thank you so much for watching today's Critical Thought. If you enjoy things, be sure to like and subscribe. And again, if you have suggestions for topics, games to look at, or whatever, let me know in the comments below. But until tomorrow, be sure to check back here and on GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games daily. And I will see you all tomorrow for our weekly Game Wisdom Live. So until then, have a great night. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoy it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and of course share with your friends, it always helps out. For daily posts on all manner of game design and industry topics, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the site and everything that I do, be sure to check out the Patreon campaign. If we can hit goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy, and I'll be able to support myself and my household. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at GW for updates throughout the day and random thoughts from me. And lastly, you can find me on Twitch right over there at GW for daily streams most nights around 10 Eastern. Thanks again for watching the video, and be sure to check out more great content coming to the Game Wisdom channel real soon.